All right, here we go. Um, Pablo Hidalgo recently put out a couple of tweets that I want to talk about. I love when this happens. I love when people put out stupid tweets because I get to do this. I get to laugh at it with other people, and I will be bringing people on. So I'm going to wait for some people to join. It's Saturday or Friday night. Let's have some fun. So let me go ahead and invite some people to the stream here, to those who want to join. Let me go to my Discord. These tweets were just brought to my attention. So now they're your typical nonsense. People are like, well, why are you even watching this, or why even react to it? But because I think it's fun. I think it's funny. I have the tweet right here, and it's kind of a thread, and we're gonna kind of go through it here. Though I think they were talking about other things, generally speaking. And then they, just kind of led into the EU and stuff. What's up, Slav? I see you guys are on Discord and video chat. If you guys want to join, I put the join button or the invite link in Jedi Knight channel, which I think you have access to. You should have access to it. I think you're Jedi. Yeah, you're a Jedi Knight. Okay. So I'm gonna wait for some of y'all to get on, and we'll start the tweeting. We'll start destroying Hidalgo. In fact, I'm gonna tag Jedi Knight for anyone who wants to join. May I join? Slav, you're a Jedi Knight. Check the Jedi Knight channel on Discord. The invite link is there. Well, you're the only person in chat, so I may put it in chat if you're being lazy. I am actually really tired right now. I've been up since 5:45 this morning. I'm sleepy, but I haven't gone live in a while, and I wanted to do this. Slav is here.
Howdy.
So before we get into this, I'm going to say I don't think Lucas I'm not like E fans who think that he had all this involvement, but he certainly had involvement in a somewhat creative way. It wasn't like obviously like he wasn't writing stories. There's a few exceptions to that, but he really wasn't writing anything. But he oversaw it. He approved it all. He read some of it. He read the comics. So he certainly had involvement. I will say he had more of an involvement in the early days, but obviously he's not going to have much of an involvement during the prequel days because he's making 3 films. And then after that, he kind of went into retirement, essentially. I mean, he didn't retire yet, but he kind of did. He didn't really make many movies after that. He made a couple, I think, but...
He produced Indy.
Well, that's true. He did do that. But again, he didn't do a whole lot. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. I'm going to kind of go through this thread. There's been a couple of tweets he actually put out. They're really, what you'd expect. But I like doing this. I enjoy getting on to people like this. It's fun. So it's funny. I think. I don't know. I haven't streamed in forever, so I felt this would be a good topic. Anyway.
I think I know what's preoccupying your mind, but I won't say it on stream.
There's nothing preoccupying my mind.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Other than these tweets. So there's a couple of things. They're talking about, apparently I have a couple of accounts blocked here that something to do with Kenner, and then I think they mentioned the Connect Star Wars game.
He only mentioned there that what I was really interested in there, because I put those tweets in the group chat, was that he said at that moment Lucasfilm was kind of going through like a soft reboot. He said something akin to that, and I had always theorized that due to TCW and the Force Unleashed kind of contradicting stuff, and then you had the Marvel comics, or not the Marvel comics. You had the 2013 Star Wars comics that were coming out around the Rebellion era that had nothing to do with the EU, and so that made sense. And there's one other thing,
Mm,
but yeah, so like it made sense for Pablo to say that. That just kind of confirmed my theory.
yeah. I mean, definitely, yeah. Lucasfilm did go through some changes, but I don't know. All companies do. Anyway, so here we go. We're at. I did not. Talking about Connect, and someone said this. So this was before the story group. Yeah, but there were people at Lucasfilm that do the same thing that the story group does now. So
James Lucino was actually one of those guys.
yeah, Super Stony, Leland Chief, all those people. They
Mm.
did a lot of the same stuff that the story group does now. They not only do they help maintain continuity, but they're helping the writers develop the story, which is what this now the story group is now an official thing. But anyway, I heard that Lucas had already paused the EU at that point. Is that true? That point, when did Kenneth come out? Because this guy is wrong. I know that was what 2008, 2007, or was that late?
What was it? Where are you at?
Someone asked. It's about. They were talking about the Connect. Asking Pablo, "Did you work on the Connect Star Wars games? Was that a big deal?" Pablo said, "I did not." So this was before the story group. I heard that Lucas had already paused the EU at that point. The point being when the Connect Star Wars games came out.
That was 2012, so that was like a year off or
Oh, okay.
close. But yeah,
Year and a few
yeah,
months. Um. So and you said I heard that Lucas never paused the EU. That's another. It's incorrect. That was all Disney Lucasfilm. In fact, Lucas is like, here, we got all these books here that my company has made. Use
that
them.
is true. That is
Not that I
true.
wanted them to use them, but Lucas did say that he never paused the EU, whatever that means anyway. There was content coming out even after the buyout, but that's whatever. We're not talking about Jonas. Nobody knows who that is. He had no involvement in the EU or its direction at that time in 2012. I don't know. That's wrong. I mean, anyway, I'll show you the quote. It was undergoing a reboot of sorts to invigorate sales with novels and comics switching to an original trilogy focus. How is that a reboot? I don't know what that.
What do you
It's a
mean? Like,
refocusing. I want to call it a reboot.
what I mean by that, what I think he means by that is that is what I meant. I think he means more of a soft reboot in the sense that it's like some things were not, some things were being contradicted, which I mean you can't lie about. That was happening, and like
Yeah.
a shift was happening towards he wanted to focus more towards original trilogy content because that's the stuff that's like, all Star Wars fans can admit they like. At the time the prequels were a little bit alienating to a lot of people, so they were like, okay, let's just get back to basics. But unfortunately, when you go into that time period of the original trilogy, there's only so much you can do because that's such covered ground before. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Um. So yeah, but I mean, that's kind of irrelevant, I guess, to the discussion here. I don't even know why he mentioned that. This whole idea is he had no involvement in the EU. I guess he mentioned it because of the other earlier conversation, but he had no involvement in the EU or its direction at that time. That being 2012, I could stretch that to 2011, I'd say. And I'll get to the quote that just destroys that. He had involvement. Now, did he have as much? I will say, like I said earlier, in the 90s, he probably didn't have as much involvement. Oh, no. He had a lot more involvement in the 90s than he did in the 2000s. I will say that. Especially in the prequels, obviously, because he was not going to focus on the books. He's focusing on the movies, making three, big blockbusters, huge blockbusters. It's Star Wars back on the big screen. So he, of course, not going to focus on the EU. But anyway, had he rocked back from that semi-retirement way, or was it out of his hands due to other reasons? Well, it wouldn't be out of his hands. He's the owner. He hadn't. Again, I'm not really care. I don't care about these guys. All I'm caring is what Paul was saying. He hadn't been involved in years since mid prequels, if not earlier. and even before that, it was pretty minimal. It was just someone else's world, as he'd say.
I if I was still going back into that conversation, I would have asked Pablo specifically, what do you mean by minimally? That's what I would have asked him.
Yeah. I mean, in term minimal,
Like
like
what's minimal to you? Like, is it just approving shit? Or sorry, my bad, approving stuff? Is that it? Or is it like is it actually being involved in what's going to happen in the story going forward? Like what do you mean by that? So I mean, it just depends what Pablo means. Now, everything past 2008, unless it's TCW, uh, it's like Force Unleashed is the only thing I know of. Was he involved in anything really other than that?
the Plagueis novel he was involved in.
He was okay.
Yeah, SWOTOR. He was he had positive feedback about SWOTOR. And even then, and there's a quote I'm going to share in a second from the writers at SWOTOR. And remember, that was late 2011. Um, the quote talked about how he approved everything, basically. In fact, I'm going to show you the quote now. This is from my response. Not that quote. That's from Dark Horse. This quote here. Has there been any reaction just as when the game was, just coming out? Has there been any reaction from George Lucas himself? George has seen the game and given positive feedback. He obviously has final say in all the Star Wars products. And that was in December of 2011. This is around that time of that original trilogy reboot that Pablo mentioned, which I don't even know what that has to do with anything. But
well, that was 2013. But yeah, that was
And then
Star Wars comics.
and then that's when I would go back to Pablo and say, okay, but like, what is your definition of involvement, and what do you mean by minimally? Is approving stuff not considered being involved? Is being actively involved in the story being involved? Like, that's what I would just ask him.
Yeah. No, we know he at the very least approved everything. Like the story is completely different and really doesn't matter. We just know that he had to either say yes or no to everything that happened. There's nothing that happened that he didn't know about. So whether or not he actually knew what the story was, he probably just knew the yes. Like, okay, make a story about this. That's fine with me. I have no issue. Go ahead and make that.
Alex, you're being a robot again.
Oh, sorry.
But we got the gist of what you're saying. But yeah, I mean, I don't even know what Pablo's saying here. I mean, this is late 2011. This is less than a year before he sells the company, by the way. So he obviously has final say in all the Star Wars products. I mean, that's a bold statement to make, which is so contrary, to what Pablo said, which was he hadn't been involved in years since mid prequels, if not earlier. That was like 10 years before SWOTOR. More than that. I mean, and if not earlier, I mean, here's some other quotes. This is one from 1993. This is when the EU was, just starting out. Be assured that nothing Star Wars related to the Dark Horse publishes escapes the scrutiny of Mr. Lucas. Bob Cooper, the editor for Dark Horse Comics. And then a little later, a few years later, John Seabrook says this. Lucas's day-to-day activities in the main house include the management of the Star Wars story, which is probably the most carefully attended secular story on Earth. And he talks about how it's all connected. And then he's talking about the Bible and things like that. I'll be right back.
Now he just leaves us alone with Robot and Slav.
You sound better now.
It's going to be in and out because that's what all happens when I do this. I don't know. We'll see.
Gotcha. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great. It's only me
good.
that's the problem.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's I kind of I'm repeating myself when I say this, but like that's what I would say to Pablo. It's like, if just approving shit is if that's not what you're considering as being involved, like what do you mean by that? Because like I know like a lot of EU fans are gonna hate me when I say this, but it's like I want to get the benefit of the doubt for Pablo in just this one scenario. That's kind of it. It's like, what do you mean?
Yeah. All right. Anyway, where was I on?
Iron Inquisitor's here, by the way.
Oh, did he? Oh, he's in. Okay, all right. Let's welcome Iron. Anyway, so
Hello.
and I have a feeling people are gonna be like, well, this is talking about, the prequels and writing them. No, it's not. I mean, continue reading. It talks about the Bible. The Bible in this day and age was basically the holocron. It
Yeah,
was
that's what it was.
So, and that included comic books, role playing guides, books, all that stuff. Um, so I mean, yeah, he managed the EU as starting as early as 1997, and as we see, all he has final say on all Star Wars products. Well, I mean, that's not the same as management of the actual story, but
Yeah.
it's still involvement. Pablo is saying he hadn't been involved in years. I mean, that's ridiculous. It's wrong.
Mhm.
And I just think it's hilarious that someone like Pablo, I mean, he wrote a pretty big book about the EU, the Essential Reader's Companion, and here he is, I mean, saying this kind of crap. And then it was just someone else's world. I mean, obviously he's talking about the Starlock quote.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, the
she
most
was pretty,
overused quote when talking about
yeah.
the EU and whether it was canon.
Pablo's
She
just a
was
sellout.
pretty,
That's all he is.
yeah. I mean, she was pretty clear on what he meant. He meant it's not his world in the sense that he's not as engaged in it. And I mean, he made the Starlock quote in what, 2005? So
Yeah.
what? After what, 5-6 years of making the prequels? Yeah, he's gonna leave the E to its own devices because he's busy making 3 blockbuster movies. I mean, is that not hard for people to understand?
Yeah, it's where his most attention would go.
Yeah,
I'm
because that's going to make him
also
the most money.
I've this is something that's not going to come out for months anyway. But the thing about Lucas in that quote, is, I mean, if we're going to go off of like what George Lucas thought about the EU, like let's say he didn't care about it at all, and because he didn't write it or didn't direct it, then all of Disney canon doesn't matter either because he had nothing to do with it. So it's stupid to go off of what George Lucas personally thought about the EU because as far as the company's concerned, the company considered it canon, so that's what matters.
Right. And I mean, the company had the authority to do so. And let me check my because I do have a freaking Twitter thread of quotes here. These quotes here I think are really interesting.
Oh, is that from the Star Wars Insider issue 23, 1994?
It's an early one, and I believe it's this one right here that I find it interesting. They're making an analogy to the Catholic Church and how the Catholic Church works. I hate to bring religion into this, but it's a really good analogy. George Lucas is considered Jesus, right? Howard Rothman is considered St. Peter. Now, if you know anything about Catholic theology, you know the Catholic Church has authority here on earth. And the Catholic Church believes that was derived from Jesus. But the saying here is that Howard Rothman, as the vice president of Lucasfilm or Lucas Licensing, has power to make canonical choices, things like that. And I think this is actually the beginning of the quote, and it continues here. And here, I mean, this was back in what, 1994, I think. It's one of the early days. Several years ago, we made a decision with George to open up the Star Wars universe beyond the scope of the first trilogy. First of all, made a decision with George to open up the Star Wars universe beyond the scope of the first trilogy and independent of whatever the next trilogy would hold. George provided us with some general guidelines. Here's some involvement about what we could and couldn't do. More involvement. For instance, we couldn't do stories in the time period a couple of generations before Star Wars because that's what he planned to focus on the next trilogy. However, we could extend the fantasy after Return of the Jedi. So, and then it talks about the consistency and things like that. So there you go. I mean, that analogy I think is excellent. It's a really good analogy. Obviously, George Lucas, Jesus, has all the power, but he's extending his power to St. Peter or Howard Rothman. So they have the that power to make canonical choices like that. And that is why for years you saw people like not that quote. Whoops. Let me find my quotes here. This one right here. This is why we have quotes like this. You didn't see Super Sony saying, "Yeah, it's a parallel universe." She didn't have to say it because that's not what the company believed. She said this though. Basically, everything except those items marked with an Infinity logo, i.e., the Star Wars Tales comics, is considered canon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, it's
pretty clear cut.
Yeah, I mean, she said that because that is what the company believed. And the company, being the people making the material, being the people that are doing this, and essentially given free reign.
Yeah.
Not all the time, but a lot of the time by Lucas. That means, hey, if they want to say it's canon, they can say that, and it would be considered true. So,
and back with that quote from George Lucas earlier, I mean, he's saying, yeah, the things that matter to me specifically are the things I was directly involved with. So that's my 6 films. So, but my universe is a big universe where a bunch of other stories can be told that I'm not interested in telling. So that's why he's saying the expanding universe is essentially everybody else's canon. I want it to be canon for everybody else, but the only things that truly matter to me are my 6 films. Is basically what he was saying. He's not saying it's not canon.
View.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a view that, he has, and he has a right to have. This isn't like Gene Roddenberry with freaking Star Trek, where Gene's like, okay, no, the books are not canon, period, in the story. That's how this is going to be looked at. It was never like that. That people want it to be, but it's not. Lucas was like, okay, I only made the movies. I mean, he made other stuff, but, he didn't care about that stuff. He only, I made my 6 movies. That's all I care about. I mean, my company, they can do whatever they want. And if, that's what it, in fact, Super Sony, there's an amazing quote that she says. I don't know if I have it on here, but we
know that he did like parts of it because Maul having a double-bladed lightsaber is because he read the Tales of the Jedi comics with Exar Kun. That's where he got
the little nods to the Clone Wars multimedia project in Revenge of the Sith.
Aayla Secura literally started off in the comics. I looked up the dates. She existed in the comics before she existed in episode 2.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to say though, going back to like Lucas and his view on canon. I don't know if I have the quote here. It's an amazing quote from Super Stoney. I really liked it because it. Oh, here it is. Well, no, this isn't it. Anyway, she basically said that it's, Lucas does not view Star Wars as his universe. He views it as our universe, our being his company and the fans. He was not selfish about his Star Wars. He wasn't. He was very selfless about it. And in fact, I mean, here we go. Here's another quote. People love to ignore this from Lucas. Now, I'm not saying this is what he actually believed, but because it does, I will say it contradicts the parallel universe quote, but that's a whole different thing. Here's what he says. Today is an amazing, if unexpected, legacy of Star Wars, that so many gifted writers are contributing new stories to the saga. So, and then, I mean, even up here, he's talking about how, these are not stories of his destiny to tell. Instead, they were spring the imagination of other writers. I mean, he did not consider it just his. He was very selfless about it. And that's what I love about George. He didn't.
Yeah, and then there was I think it was 2003 where he says that like the expanded universe has to fill in the gaps, created in the films. It was like about Anakin Scar.
Yeah, you want to know about that? Go read the comics.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's what he said. Hey, if you want to know what happened to, Anakin and a Scar, read the comics. And here's some more quotes from freaking Stackpole on Twitter. I mean, I don't know why Pablo thinks he can just say that kind of stuff, and then, I mean, here we go. What I can say is that George did approve Mara and Luke marrying. I mean, yeah, it's and then here's some more stuff. I don't know who made this, but
here's some cool graphic.
Pablo. Here's some quotes from Pablo.
That's man himself.
Let's look at this. I did such a display of force power needed to be vetted by George. This is from Pablo. This is what 1994.
That's why he's such a sellout, because he just changed his opinion on a dime the
my
moment Disney
God.
bought the rights.
Oh, he had no involvement, but here he is approving of force power used by Mara Jade. I mean, this is why Pablo. This is why people don't like Lucasfilm anymore, or at least EU fans don't like him, because I mean, this is what they do.
They gaslight and lie.
Yeah, and for what? For money.
Oh wait.
What it's all
Oh
about.
right. You remember Coruscant? You know, this big city planet in episodes 1 through 3. Where did that come from? Oh, it came from Heir to the Empire. Who would have thought?
If it wasn't for that book, it would have been called like Had a Bad One or whatever.
Yeah. So, I don't know who. I think someone. There's another one like this kind of style of post.
Yeah, I remember seeing it somewhere.
Yeah, one with George Lucas and I think Tales of the Jedi. There may have been one with Dark Empire. I'm not sure, but I mean, here you go. I mean, here's from Pablo's mouth. Luke specified that this telepathy is due to an innate difference in Mara Jade herself and should be limited to her alone. That's a pretty creative, decision that he made there. It also kind of proves that some force powers can just be innate to a certain person, like force healing. Not, people say it's a plot hole. I don't think it is because, anyway, that's a whole different debate. But, yeah. So I completely forgot about this quote from Pablo. I mean, he's a freaking hypocrite. I don't know what else I can say here. It wasn't a whole lot of quotes that I wanted to show, but there you go. I don't know. I just wanted an excuse to go live, and I thought this would be the funniest way to do it. So there's two. Well, who is the other? Oh, OG Star Wars. See what she had to say. The Reader's Companion and even the development of the games canceled. Share George was involved with. I don't even know what that means. In 2012, there was an interview with authors, and Leland said there was no reboot. Of course, this was before the buyout. So,
well, another thing with Force Unleashed is we know that he was a little bit more involved with that than he was with other parts of the EU, like not just approving yes or no, as opposed to most of the stuff where he would just say yes, no, rewrite it or something.
Also, Marcel, I didn't make this. I found it on Twitter. Anyway, I don't really know what else to say. I think I've kind of said everything I wanted to say. Do you guys got anything else?
My April Fool's video says it all. So, if everyone wants further, just go back to that. So with Obama as the thumbnail, it's perfect.
Sometimes I wish he would hate on the EU more so I could respond to it. That's funny.
Yeah, it seems like he doesn't do that as often as he did.
How many people do you think are in the story group?
Christopher Nelson's here, if I can be understood for once. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I've said everything, so I think we can just kind of chill for now. So anybody else wants to come in, I'll just throw the link in chat if you guys want to come on and talk.
What'd you think about Pablo's thoughts? Revanchist, what'd you say? And the robot is a show I would watch. Oh yeah.
Oh, he was talking about me and you.
Oh.
Because I'm a robot half the time.
What was your thoughts on how George treated TCW? I was curious on that, Lance.
How did George treat TCW?
Yeah.
You mean?
Yeah.
I mean, he treated it like he kind of did the EU. I mean,
yeah, you kind of either approve or disapprove of a story, and that was about as far as he went.
Yeah, he threw ideas.
Yeah, he sat down like weekly with the writers to discuss things, but didn't directly write or direct anything.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he had directing involvement with a few episodes. Actually, he just never got credit for that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because there's a video out there of when he's talking about landing at Point Rain, the Geonosis arc, and how he he did not like the directing or the shot composition for when they landed. And so I said, okay, we're going to go back into the editing room. We're going to watch a few movies, and then we're going to all pick shots like that we wanted to use, and then we're going to edit it that way. So he was in the editing room choosing shots. So that's technically
fair.
directing.
But shots aren't like story things.
Well, he would come up with a lot of the stories that they wanted to do. And in fact, he actually outlined a whole episode for Katie Lucas because she was one of the writers in the series.
Which one? Do you know?
It was the one with actually Ayla Secura. The first in season 1, I believe.
Oh yeah, the one where they crash on the planet with the pacifist lemurs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, the monkey people.
Yeah, the monkey people.
Monkey people.
Something that Pablo said tonight, and I put in the group chat earlier, was that when it came to doing TCW, George was the one that was kind of adamant on not using EU material. And he said that him and like Pablo and Dave would try to add in EU material. George just said that's not really what he was interested in doing, which kind of makes sense considering what was happening around 2008, what me and Lance were talking about earlier. Now, you can say, okay, Pablo was maybe lying about that. One, I would say regarding TCW, there's no really a reason to, considering that's canon anyway in Disney canon. But I would also say that Dave's kind of backed that up, and Katie in an interview herself, I think, kind of backed that up as well. And so I would say kind of like what Sheev said at one time, where Lucas's opinion of the EU would kind of just change depending on when you asked him. And especially later in the game, I don't think...
Oh yeah, there's a quote from in 2006 where the Chi confirms that you're never going to know what his opinion on the EU at any given moment, because his opinion on Star Wars outside of the films is something that is constantly evolving.
Yeah,
and we can see that. And I, like with the Splinter of the Mind's Eye reprint quote, or the and then compare that to Starlog quote like I did earlier. I mean, very different views. One he's saying, it's part of the saga. The others he's saying, it's a parallel universe. This is why I hate when people try and use Lucas as a resource.
I wanted to build off that for on 1 second, Alex. Sorry, just 1 sec. 1 sec. Well, that's what I wanted to say is that with George, it's like, yeah, the EU was canon. I'm not saying it wasn't. It's just weird how George would treat it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a mystery.
But I always say, everybody gets mad at Dave, and it's like, look, when it comes to Disney's canon and how he's treating that, how he's shoving Ahsoka and things where she admittedly probably shouldn't be, you can get aggravated with him with that. But with the EU, if this really is true that George didn't, when it comes to TCW, it's like,
but George was not. But George was not involved with every episode. I'll go to a specific example of something that George had nothing to do with, that it was entirely Dave Filoni, and he did it just because he didn't care. So for the episode where they go to this prison or whatever, and Tarkin's there and everything, and they have Evan Peel, right? And Evan Peel dies. It didn't need to be Evan Peel. It could have been literally any Jedi. He could have made up a Jedi. He chose to kill that one. And maybe he didn't read the book where he actually dies. It doesn't matter. The point is, he could have used any Jedi, and he had Leland Shee always. He just didn't talk to him because he didn't care. He chose.
George, Dave actually, he talks about that episode on Rebel Recon Radio, Rebel Force Radio. He doesn't mention Evan Peel specifically, but he did talk about how George was involved with when they were making the scripts for that, because George had to read those scripts. Mm-hmm. And he completely changed the ending to, I think, one or a few of those episodes. So he was involved with that writing process. I'm not saying he was in charge of Evan Peel being there. I don't know whose decision that was. But considering when it comes to, I would say, if this is true of how Lucas didn't really want the EU to come and to be involved with TCW, it's kind of strange, because it's like, I could see why Dave says that in that interview when he's being interviewed from 2015.
But the thing that's weird about Dave, though, that you have to take into consideration, is that whenever somebody would say something positive about TCW, he would always take the credit. He would never give it to George. He would always say it was something that him or his team came up with almost every time. Whenever it was something that people didn't like, he would always say, "Oh, well, George was the one helping us. So if you don't like it, take it up with George."
I don't know about that.
I mean, maybe not every time. He did that a lot, though.
If you
can go
watch the
watch multiple interviews
TCW,
on
if you watch the TCW movie with the audio commentary, he's saying a lot of stuff with George. Oh yeah, George wanted that to happen.
That was one of the first things that.
Yeah,
the movie's gonna be different from the TV show because it's like one of the first things that came out with TCW. So of course he's gonna be more involved with that because it came out in theaters as opposed to the one that was just on TV.
It was originally supposed to be episodes, though.
No, I know, but it came out in theaters, so George is gonna care a little bit more about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but I mean, what Christopher Nelson says is true. I said earlier, sorry, but real quick, because what Lucas thinks is irrelevant. Because if we're going off of that, then we can't talk about Disney at all because George doesn't like any of that and has nothing to do with any of that. So, okay, he might like some of it. I don't know. I don't keep up with what George says about it. But the main point is he's not involved with most of that. So if we're going off of that, then that means that none of that matters either. The fact is he didn't. Yeah, I know you're not saying it's not canon, but like if he's willing to, he's still in control of the company. He's allowing the company to claim before 2014 that the EU is canon. He doesn't need to let them do that. He's allowing them to. Even if he starts having a negative opinion toward it for whatever reason, he still never made them say, "Oh, make it all non-canon." He let them keep calling it canon. He knew the stuff that they were publishing and saying about it, and he allowed it to continue. So why would he do that? You know?
Yeah, and that's ultimately what I was trying to get to was, you know, when it comes to Dave and everything, it's like ultimately it did go by George, and you know, I think people need to hold him more responsible for that more than Dave.
Maybe. I mean, it's all speculation at that point. All I know is that Dave Filoni is the primary writer and producer and stuff on TCW. We always have a speculation.
Wrote 5 episodes.
Okay. Well, he was involved with all of it. We don't know how much George actually did with every single episode. You have specific episodes you can find, sure, I will grant you that. But we know that, unlike George, Filoni was involved with everything because it's his show.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel the blame necessarily has to land more on him than it does George. Now, if you're saying, oh, George was the one that was in charge of the whole show, then yeah, then it's totally on George. But it's not because he wasn't involved with every episode and not even the majority.
Well, here's what I'll say. Here's my opinion. I think it's really on an episode-to-episode basis because there was a lot of, well, there was this, you know, there would be this story arc where Lucas didn't really say anything. He just said, oh, that's fine. And there was other stories like the Mandalore stuff where it's like
that he was involved
he's over here saying, yeah, you can go ahead and contradict the lore. I mean, but then again, Lucas has that power. I mean, that doesn't really say much. Lucas contradicted his own stuff in his own movies.
Yeah.
So Lucas saying, oh, you know, Lucas contradicting stuff is just George Lucas. It's not anything special or unique. But at the same time, I will say TCW is T-canon, which was not considered quote-unquote EU according to Leland Shee. It was in that it was George's pillar, quote-unquote. So, I mean, I don't know. He kind of had that power. But
yeah.
Again, I don't really worry about it because I knew she and all the rest of the gang were going to go back and fix everything, and I would have had complete faith that they would have fixed it, and made it all tie together.
And that's how I feel. Oh, yeah, that's how I feel about The Force Unleashed. Is that we don't really do we ever get Galen Merrick outside of those games?
I think we would have probably eventually.
We would have had the EU not been decanonized, but since that was one of the later things, no. We had the 2 games, the 2 novelizations, and then we didn't really get anything else. I mean, he probably would have died because in Force Unleashed 3, we would have had him and Vader working together for some reason. And I imagine he would have had to die because he's not in the original trilogy, obviously. So they probably would have had him die off. But that's all speculation because we never got a conclusion to the story. That's something that's just left hanging in the air because of the decanonization. Like, I would love if we ever
question for all y'all.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Do you think the EU would have been rebooted at some point under Lucasfilm if George was still owning the company? Like, let's say Disney never bought it. Do you think at some point it would have?
That's something that Noah Quality Autism seems to think because he agrees with you about the last couple books in the expanded universe: Honor Among Thieves, Razor's Edge, and then the Brian Wood comics from 2013, which were basically
They're
you
not
don't have
part of
to
the
know
EU.
Yeah, they're not. Well, I mean, Honor Among Thieves fits. It's fine, and it still has the Legends banner on it. And Razor's Edge isn't contradictory or anything, so you can accept it as canon to the EU because it doesn't contradict anything, but it doesn't require any EU knowledge to enjoy those books. And but the Brian Wood one specifically, Matt talked about it in his reviews back in the day that they come out, and at the end of it, when it got canceled, and went, oh, by the way, this was never canon. We were trying something new. You could basically read this as what if the entire expanded universe never existed, and that's what this was. But so I get the theory. I don't know if it's true though. I think they were just trying something with that, but it clearly failed. So I feel they would have gone back to sticking with the EU because they tried to branch out, and those comics didn't sell very well. I mean, they did at first because admittedly the
art.
covers,
yeah,
the art is beautiful, but then the actual comics themselves are pretty eh. So
yeah, it's really hard to say what would have gone on had he had kept it.
Because I think at some point we would have probably gotten something akin to Rebels at some point. Like we would have gotten...
Rebels was actually announced in 2013, when EU stuff was coming out. So
yeah, I mean, it would have been in the EU. Would it have contradicted stuff more? Probably, because it was a Dave Filoni show. But
well, here's the thing.
It is what it is.
Here's the thing. A lot of Rebels doesn't contradict much of the EU.
Well, yeah, there's only
everything with Thrawn does.
Well, some people can argue that.
Well, that was in 2016. That was after.
Thrawn was not a grand.
So if Rebels could have gone in a different direction.
Well, there's obviously some things
possibly.
that do. I'm not saying that. Like the Grand Inquisitor, there was a different Grand Inquisitor in that time in the EU, obviously. But Rook died, of course, and but I was just saying, it's like, Henry Gilroy was also, like, a lot of people don't bring him up. Henry Gilroy was also one of the main people involved with TCW. In fact, he was more or less the head writer because he was writing more episodes in seasons 1 and 2. But he was also really a big part of Rebels, and he wrote stuff in the EU. He wrote a few of the comics, and I believe some short stories. And if you listen to the audio commentary for the movie, he's like constantly saying, like, "Oh yeah, I was trying to add in stuff from the EU and here, and here," which was pretty cool. So it's I get that. I really do think Dave does like the EU. A lot of people don't seem to like that. I think what Pablo said, I do believe that. I do think Dave did try to push stuff in when he could.
Everything Dave talked about, though, is always like the Thrawn trilogy. Like, that's like the bare basic, like, beginner level, like, that's what you read. That's like what everybody knows about. Anytime you talk about something more nuanced in the EU, he doesn't seem to know about it. Like, the Vong are big, so of course you know about the Vong. But that's like the novel that takes place right before episode 2. That's what I mean. Like he's never talked about like things that are like more niche. Like
my friend Elliot thinks that he just had a basic surface level understanding of the expanded
he had a Wikipedia understanding. Like he knew the basis. The general stuff. But he didn't actually care. I mean, I can't say that. I don't know the guy, but from what it seems like, it doesn't seem like he actually deep dived into any of these stories for real. Besides maybe the Thrawn trilogy, because that's the one that literally everyone
he
knows
wrote.
about.
He read Open Seasons. He's a big fan of that. He tried.
That's
to keep
fair,
that
but that's
canon.
also a really popular Boba Fett or Jango Fett comic. That's what I'm saying. Like the really popular stuff that everybody would know about. But what about the more niche things? Like he didn't know about it because he didn't care about it. But I didn't want to mention in the comments, the Sentinel mentioned the famous freaking thing where Dave Filoni's caught in a lie, where he starts talking about how they came up with the idea for Darth Maul coming back and having the robot legs, and then Katie corrects him on stage, being like, "What are you talking about? We got that from the comics," and then he just kind of like freaks out and just kind of moves on. Like,
oh really? He did that?
Yeah, he did. He did. It's really funny. He's like, okay, whatever. Moving on. It's like,
wait. I thought that was a George thing to make Maul come back.
It might have been.
I don't remember, but the point is that
because Sam Whitworth talks about that being George's idea.
Well, that might be true, but in the
that's Sam
interview,
Whitworth.
that's not what. it might be true, but in an interview that's not what Filoni said. He said that they came up with it. So
I'd like to see
and
that
then
interview. If someone could like, I'm on Discord. If someone can send me that interview, that'd be cool.
I'll play it on stream.
Okay.
You have it? You have it ready to go? That's funny.
Just DM it to me on Discord. Whoever has it.
As we're waiting.
That's for waiting.
Oh man, what was I? I have I started reading the R. Singh stuff in Star Wars '98.
Mm.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I like it.
She's like a proto Grievous. I kind of love that.
Yeah, the
Like
way
she-
she like collected the lightsabers and such.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, she was like Grievous before Grievous came onto the scene.
She killed a master in front of that kid. And she
Yeah.
was like such a bitch to her. And then she's like,
Yeah.
"Oh man, I may have gone too far."
That's one
Yeah, I
thing I
think her
was
name was
really
like
like.
Zion as Amersu or something like that. That's I think what the name of that Twi'lek was.
That was one thing I was really disappointed too by the TCW. I'm like, you have this really cool female character, and you don't have her be force sensitive in the show and do stuff when
That's weird that they didn't acknowledge the force sensitive stuff.
like. When
But I do think
everyone
it's funny
else is.
though. I do think it is funny though, like how when Boba and her show up to Hondo's place and like Hondo, like, she just kisses Hondo like right there, and Hondo looks down at Boba and he's like, "Not mine, I'm assuming." Like that was.
You know what I realized? Hondo is basically just Talon Card,
Yeah.
which I thought was really funny when I made that connection. I was like,
Mhm.
they're very similar characters.
I smell profits.
You know.
Yo, last week I actually finally finished Rebels.
Oh yeah.
Well, how was
Oh,
that?
you know, the only thing I didn't enjoy was like, you know,
Helicopters?
the Rebels Thrawn, the world between worlds, and saving Ahsoka. Just
Yeah. Well, supernatural
The last
encounters
two
might make
episodes.
that
The
canon.
last two episodes
so.
did. Oh no, wait, that did have to do more with Thrawn. I'm not seen the last two episodes in a few years, but I have watched most of the series recently. Isn't that crazy that's about to be in the EU?
Yeah.
I was
That,
making.
yeah.
I know I'm trolling y'all when I say that. But,
No, I'm cautiously optimistic about the book. That is a part that is probably going to annoy me, unless he like somehow manages to make that so compelling.
there's
Or
ways you
find it
can.
annoying. I'm
There's-
sure I have to read it first before I can, because as of now, I'm very cautious about whatever section of the book that takes place.
Yeah.
oh
'cause-
my, depending on what happens, I might be having to do something like my TCW retcon series, but with Rebels. Oh my.
Here's the thing. Besides all the lore stuff, what I can't wait to see in this book is all the art he commissioned for it. Because he says
Oh,
there is
yeah.
a bunch of art. And that's like, so like
Yeah.
what stuff like have we not like seen visually in Star Wars are we gonna get? That's pretty cool. I can't wait for that.
Yeah. And it's the only piece of new EU that we're probably going to get. So, I mean, I hope
For
the
now,
EU
my
gets
friend.
continued, but yeah,
Remain
I hope
hopeful.
the EU gets continued. We
Yeah.
shall see.
Remain optimistic.
Yes, no, I hope the EU gets continued. I'll continue to fight for it, but you know, as of now, this is probably going to be our only source of EU for at least a little bit.
Is Chris Nelson going to join?
Yeah, he was commenting here before. Maybe he just popped in and said hello, you know, comments.
He's got a lot of kids, same as Matt.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
He needs to sleep.
Vastly overstated, Chris. Oh, I disagree completely. I think it's really understated. Everybody thinks he has no involvement. It's like that's not true at all.
No, he definitely did, but he
Yeah,
wasn't.
there's
This,
no denying there was involvement.
Some
They're
people
just-
do, man.
well,
Like
they're stupid, but
what's Nando or what's his name? Ted Larson.
Mandalore? Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Well, yeah, like
he
he's
does.
but he's like the known, like the most famous EU person that just doesn't like TCW. He made an entire like 2-part video series that were like an hour long on why TCW doesn't fit. So
That's
I
fine.
mean, he's
Like
very
I know,
biased,
I'll acknowledge
but-
it don't fit, but it's at the same
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
don't lie.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, like, that's like you're picking like the most extreme example of like an
Fair
E
enough.
and it doesn't like Filoni. So, but I mean, I get it. But I think most people are more like, yeah, George was involved, but he wasn't this like he wasn't writing every episode.
No,
Or
no, I don't,
super
I don't,
involved.
I don't claim that.
No, I know you're not claiming that.
Nor was Dave
Yeah.
though too.
No, what Dave does though a lot, which I mean, I would have to go find every single one of his interviews, but often he will go, if there's something that people liked, he go, yeah, that was totally my idea and my team's. You really give it to George for that. But if it was something that people didn't like, like, well, you know, that was me and George's decision, but if you don't like it, take it up with George, you know, the god of Star Wars, you know. Like, you'd always do that, where he would never take the blame on himself if it was negative, ever. That's almost a fact, I think. I've yet to see him actually take credit for any failure.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of things in TCW, like minor things, where I think George Lucas, you're right, where he didn't care about enough of the EU to even know about these things, to where it's like, if
I
Dave
just,
Filoni,
want,
at
I
least
just
had-
want this here. I just want this here because
yeah, if Dave Filoni had a basic understanding of like the general stuff of most of the EU, then he purposely went out of his way to contradict it, because there's like things that could easily not be contradicted, because why would you unless you knew about it, that were contradicted, and that would happen from time to time, and it's like, but why? Like again with the example of Evan Peel, like I don't think that was a George Lucas decision.
Well, I mean, if George just kind of states towards the beginning of the series, especially when they're trying to add stuff in the EU, and he just says, "No, what we're doing is not involved with the EU," and that seems like the thing. Like from what I understand, that seems like what happened. It's like I don't blame them for like thinking that then, but then the whole thing comes down to should George have even done that? And I don't think he should have. But I mean, hey,
I just want to point out that TCW had to get its own canon status. It wasn't in G canon. It wasn't in My Six Films, which is George's canon. It wasn't in C canon, which was all of the
everything
books,
else,
comics,
yeah.
novels, everything else. It was T canon, which only applied to his show, because there was other TV shows. There was the 03 Clone Wars. There was Ewoks and Droids, and those were just C canon. They were just a part of the canon. But TCW is the only one that had to be put in T to have its own specific canon, because it so blatantly contradicted everything.
Yeah, you're right, Sentinel. He wanted Rex to be Alpha 17, and George said, "No, there's too many people with A in their names at the beginning of it." And he says, when we're selling merchandise, he says that's not going to look right. So he said, change his name, and then Rex just became his own character entirely, which I'm okay with.
Rex is cool.
Fine.
He's one of the better parts of the EU. I like Rex enough. One thing I've always thought about, like with the Embarn arc, which is probably my favorite thing that TCW did. The only thing I always hate about it, this isn't like a George and thing. I just hate the decision to make Krell be secretly trying to become a dark acolyte for Dooku. It ruins all the nuance of all 4 episodes. Had he just been like a quote unquote,
He's just a crazy guy.
They're not
Oh,
crazy.
yeah.
Not crazy. Like he's just a bigot. Like he just doesn't value clones because he sees them the same as droids. Like if
I
you
will
just make
admit
that
to you,
more nuanced, like,
that is better. That
would have been
would
better.
have been better. I'll agree with you.
If they did actually use the EU, what they could have done instead of using Krell, they could have done, because this is already established. We were talking about earlier with the Force Unleashed. You use Ramkota. Now you have more nuanced, more gray, because you have a guy that you know is a good guy, but obviously has a huge bias toward clones. It wouldn't be as blind as the episodes kind of make it out to be in the actual thing.
And it's so
Right.
crazy because he works with the clone in Battlegrounds.
Oh.
And he works with X2, and it's like,
Hmm.
wait a minute, I thought you said you couldn't clone Jedi, Kodo. What the heck? I literally work with one. I love Kodo,
You
bro.
can. They just go crazy almost every
I get-
time.
If you ever play the PS2 game of The Force Unleashed, they don't keep the same lines, and then of course there's other missions that aren't in the PS3 version, to where he has more lines. Dude, that voice actor for Coda, he was going ham, dude. He didn't care. He was just going out at the
I remember in the in between mission screen on the Wii, PSP, and PS2 version, which are all the same version. He would be once you get him, he's on your ship and he's just like sitting there drunk, saying lines like, "You can't with the Empire," and he's like also like, "What would Master Windu do?"
Yeah, it's just really corny, and he's like, "Yeah, I love Coda." What you think you're doing there, boy?
Yeah, boy. Yeah, I love it. He did that before got awarded.
Yeah, the original. Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Max has come.
Hi.
What's going on?
I just came to pop in. It's like 1 a.m., but
no, you should sleep. You should not be
I'm
here.
good. I don't have work tomorrow.
Okay, that's fair. That's good then. You're
hang
chilling.
with us.
Yeah.
Yeah. How's Darkness going?
Oh, I completed that like a week
Oh, you
ago.
did? How was it as a whole?
It was great. I really enjoyed Dark Nest. I thought it was a lot of fun.
Did you think the bug sex was as bad as people made it out to be?
Absolutely not. It kind of just went right over my head.
Right?
So.
Thank you. Validation at last.
She enjoying the Troy Denning verse.
Yeah.
Noah's not going to come find you. Noah's going to beat you up. He doesn't like Denning.
My freaking what is it? My status on Discord is like Troy Denning is my dad or something.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I gotta go see this.
Oh, jeez. My favorite quote from Troy Denning is when he's being interviewed by some chick at this con, and he goes, Han Solo has a wife. I too have a wife. Like, that's great, man.
Troy Jennings, I don't know, he's my dad, I guess. I don't mind. I thought his writing was really good. I mean, at some points it could get a little jumbled, and but it wasn't anything that I couldn't handle.
But he completely portrayed the characters. Come on.
Yeah.
I literally never saw any of that.
That's a really good Noah impression. Spot on.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've heard
it's a little too deep
about Jason's fall, and they're like, "Oh, he's a completely different character."
Oh my god.
If we're gonna complain about that, sorry. I just gotta destroy Noah for a second. Oh, if Jason being inconsistent is a problem in Legacy of the Force, then I guess we have to hate on all of New Jedi Order because Jason acts nothing like he does in Young Jedi Knights, and there's only a 6-month gap in between the last one, Young Jedi Knights, and freaking the Vector Prime.
That was one of the things that was polarizing most for me when I started NJO, because I had just come off Young Jedi Knights, and I was like, "Oh, Jason's just this silly goofball kid who told these really corny jokes," and then you meet him in NJO, and you're like, "Holy shit, he's basically a philosopher now."
Yeah, and there's no explanation for it. At least
no, there isn't. I'm like, great.
Yeah. At least Darkness says it's been 5 years when he went and learned stuff. So there's at least time for change. 6 months is not enough. And if you're gonna say you change in 6 months, you gotta actually explain that. At least tell us. But you don't. You just don't even address it.
Nah, it's the EU. It's consistent. It's bad.
I mean, the only thing I can think of is the war affecting him or something. That's.
Hey Lance, what are you doing, bro?
But the war, you see, in Vector Prime, didn't actually start till after that book. So he was just a philosopher because.
Bro turned into Nietzsche overnight.
Yeah,
he
would just argue with
Anakin. Pick up some philosophy books.
So
bro got a hold of Das Kapital, or got a hold of and what's that one? Oh yeah, the Beyond Good and Evil. Yeah, I picked up Beyond Good and Evil.
How's Bloodlines going so far by Travis?
Great. I'm actually really enjoying it. I would have been reading it a lot earlier, but I started the KOTOR comics instead. So but it's going great. I'm like like 4 chapters in, I guess. Yeah, I'm like 4 chapters in. I'm really enjoying it so far.
Yeah, the KOTOR
You're
comics are
disrespecting
my.
Karen Travis, essentially. You're not reading her Mandalorian porn, essentially.
This is my first intro to Karen Travis, actually.
Yeah, I think Karen Travis is a great writer. I just think she can be a bit preachy. It's less in Legacy of the Force, but in the Republic Mano books, she does harp on how much the Jedi suck and how they are abusing bombs and using them as slave labor, which she's not entirely wrong, but she's very preachy about it.
I wonder why George Lucas. I wonder why George Lucas didn't like her.
She spoke facts, and then she got upset. But regardless, like I think Karen Travis and Aaron Olson are the only ones that have legitimately made me cry. Because there's specifically in Bloodlines 2, there's multiple times where I got kind of teary-eyed. But there's one scene, I won't spoil it, but it's near the end. I won't give any context, but it's just like Jason, Han, and Leia talking. And by the end of it, I just was like, damn, I feel like I'm in a bad place right now. And I'm not these characters. So, but I like.
Max, I got a question.
Mm-hmm.
How much is Boba Fett involved in this book?
Cover.
Boba.
Yeah, like doing a Chris Nelson there. How much is Boba Fett involved?
Well, at least you're not doing like a Matt Wilkins where he says some questionable pronunciations of other characters.
To load for Rob.
Mainly,
and he's a guy because he refuses to admit that Verge is a woman, so he just don't care. And he always calls Verge a man.
His pronunciation of Nagasato kind of worries me a bit.
You know, I actually like his pronunciation. Triculus.
Marcel was talking about it on the stream last night. I was cracking up about it.
It's just because Matt's breath is leaking. He's got so many kids. He can't no more.
But like honestly though, for real, I am curious. Like, how much is Boba in it?
He's in it. Well, he's only 4 chapters
in it quite a lot.
He's in it. Okay.
He's in it quite a lot. He's in the whole thing because it's a Karen Travis book, so he's gonna be in it.
Is he in like all of all
the Travis ones in Legacy of the Force? He's in. Yes.
Okay, but is he like in most? Is he in most of the series though?
He's in all of Legacy of the Force. Yes.
Okay, cool.
He's not really the first book.
He's not focused on. Basically, if it's written by Travis, he's going to be in it. If it's not written by Travis, he's not going to be there. But he does matter to the plot of the books. I will say, hot take, Boba Fett in Legacy of the Force is probably the time I care about him the most, and the time where he has the most character development, as opposed to the rest of his entire existence, where he's just a bounty hunter. So I actually really like Boba Fett.
What about the children's comics? Or the comics, the children's novels.
The Boba Fett young adult books kind of suck. I'm not gonna lie. I haven't read them.
I haven't read them in years, so I don't remember.
They're okay, but they're what you expect from a children's book, as opposed to like Jedi Apprentice with Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, which are legitimately good books.
Okay. Yeah, I've listened to the YJK audiobook of the first one. Oh my god, Jedi Apprentice. Dear Lord. It's like, bro, you didn't have to go that hard, but you did.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wolverton knows what he's doing, man. And then and then I start Jedi Apprentice 2, and then Jude Watson just walks back like the entire like last few chapters of the previous book. And like Obi-Wan's character development. I'm like, okay, thanks, Miss Watson.
Oh, don't worry, you'll love Watson by the end.
Okay, hopefully she.
Because she wrote the majority of them, and the best ones are her books. So.
Okay. All right. I was not impressed. I like their Jedi Quest stuff though.
See, I don't like Jedi Quest as much as Jedi Apprentice. I think the reason why is because we have one movie with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, and then he dies, and that's it. That's all we ever get of him. Whereas opposed to we have all the Clone Wars and everything, and we have Episode 3 and Episode 2 with Anakin and Obi-Wan. So it is cool to get to see that 10-year gap. But at the same time, I already kind of know their dynamic. They flesh it out a little bit more, makes it a little bit better. But I still get the gist already. as opposed to I have no idea really what the dynamic. How did Obi-Wan become Qui-Gon's apprentice? How they actually become
Yeah,
this
because
dynamic. So there's a whole bunch of stuff I actually got to experience there.
I get you, because like I absolutely loathe episode 1, but I kind of I really want to read Jedi Apprentice and be like go back and watch it, and just with all that context, just watch Duel of the Fates, and it'd be like, oh man,
I'll tell you, I teared up a little bit, which I never did before.
that's crazy.
Oh my god.
Yeah, man.
I will always cry at Qui-Gon.
Qui-Gon. Yeah,
Sorry, I'm eating a cookie right now.
that's fair.
But every time I watch Phantom Menace, I cry, and I'm like, I keep hoping for a different outcome, and that never happens, and I get
But
sad.
that's the point of Duel of the Fates. There is no different
Yeah.
outcome. That's the sad thing.
And man,
least-
that dramatic music when it happens to Qui-Gon and when Obi-Wan goes, no! It's just, it hits
Now
you.
I know where all that no came from because I read 14 books of them.
But on the
No.
topic of like going back and watching it with like, new context, like I did that after reading Darth Plagueis for the first time, and like going back and you're like, hey, Darth Plagueis is like, he's here, but you can't see him,
Yeah, he's
And
over
no,
there,
what
he's
was
just
he?
in the
I
shadow.
haven't read the
Yes.
book yet.
And knowing that while Duel of the Fates is happening, that whole
He's
scene
dying.
that Sidious talks about, about killing his master, is
Yeah.
happening at the same exact time as Obi-Wan is fighting Darth Maul.
Mm-hmm.
It's
I
so
love it.
crazy to think about that.
So like,
Yeah.
I'm curious. I heard, does Tales of the Jedi, the TV show, not the comics,
Mm-hmm.
does the show when Dooku's there with Palpatine, does that like reference Plagueis, like what's happening in that scene?
I don't know. I haven't watched.
Not particularly. I mean,
Yeah, it's kind of just its own thing. Since
yeah,
it's
there's
canon.
sort of a similar scene in Plagueis. Like, I mean, Dooku's there throughout like the whole book, mostly throughout like maybe like the second half of the book.
Yeah,
No, there's a bunch of scenes with Palpatine and Dooku, but it's kind of
But he's
towards
not-
the end where there's more of like the Dooku renouncing his
Yeah.
his Jedi ways and everything.
pretty much after Qui-Gon dies, he
Mhm.
quickly succumbs
'Cause I haven't
with
I haven't read Plagueis, but of course I was listening to Star Wars Theory, and he said that reference Plagueis. So
No.
I'm like, okay, yeah, I can't take this guy's
No,
word.
that's just theory being theory.
That's theory. Did you see what I did on this last stream?
Oh, and you did the supernatural encounters thing.
Yeah, I it's like it was like I sent like $3 $2 super chats. That's like the lowest you can go. I was like,
Yeah.
I want to help out the rest of the fandom. This is just $6. It's like I can get them all on board. Maybe he'll
Yeah.
look it up. Maybe
Okay.
Josh will look it up. I don't know. Nope.
Fuck them.
He doesn't even
Especially
acknowledge it.
$6.
Like, bro, I sent you money, you absolute tool. I hate you.
Yeah.
At least Josh acknowledged me.
Josh is kind of a weirdo too.
He's a weirdo, but at least he's nice. Like,
Yeah.
he's a fence sitter, and he's kind of like a mundane Matt in that kind of way. But at least he's a nice dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just weird. I know James Gunn like roasted him on Twitter. It's pretty funny.
That was
No,
good.
really.
Here's the
Mhm.
thing, though. Here's the thing. Nobody acknowledged this after the fact, but it was like, Josh wasn't wrong. Like, what do we get 2 days later? Like, Henry's no longer Superman.
Yeah.
I found that interesting. Like, yeah, Gunn, I think, because he said James Gunn doesn't like Henry Cavill. What Josh was probably meaning to say is that Cavill's probably out. And then Gunn was like, no, I do like Cavill. What are you talking about? And it was just like, it was crazy. It was funny, though.
It was.
It was.
I remember seeing it. I was like, damn, you got him.
Mhm.
But no,
Did you
Star
see all
Wars
the-
3 is totally wrong on that. Does not reference Plagueis at all. He just likes to make these weird like jumps to like things that have no connection whatsoever. So
Bro be doing gymnastics in his head.
yeah, honestly, he does these
Yeah,
really weird
canon.
mental gymnastics to like make these points. It's so weird.
Me and Lance was in the VC with me when I was doing all that. And Lance was trying to comment in the comment section or like, in the chat
Yeah.
on the stream. And I was like, bro, I don't see your chats anywhere. I think you're blocked. And he's like, oh yeah,
Oh,
that's probably
no.
because he said, that's probably because I said fuck Star Wars Theory a few streams back. And I'm like, yeah, that's probably it, Lance.
That's probably why.
Yeah, he read my comment on stream, and he's like, he laughed at it. Then he's like, "Wait, who is that?" And he probably blocked me. So.
Oh my god.
But hey, so I can say that I've been blocked by Star Wars Theory.
Based.
Wow, that's a badge of honor.
Yeah, honestly, I'd like get that framed, like something like that, or like a certificate of authenticity.
I watched this fan film with Noah. I watched this fan film with Noah with Darth Vader and stuff. I love the part where the camera zooms down on the stormtrooper's feet and you see that they're wearing like slippers. I thought that was the best part of the film. That's all I wanted to add.
There's no slippers in Star Wars.
Didn't Peter Cushing? Because I read this somewhere, like he wears his slippers on set because the shoes.
Yeah, so that's why they never had a shot of him like all the way out.
I think Jay might be in the thing.
Isn't it crazy that like he in the old Hammer films that him and Christopher Lee were in a Dracula movie together?
That is kind of crazy.
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where he gets the name Count Dooku from, is because he played Dracula for about like 20 movies, I think. And like Christopher Lee is like tall too. He's like 6'3" or 6'5" or something. Like, geez Louise,
dude's huge.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got the like coolest voice.
And together, destroy Sith.
Yeah. It's like when he's like having that speech to Obi-Wan in episode 2, I get the feeling that he's being real with him.
No, he's just being honest.
He was telling him the truth, and he was like, "All right, you won't believe me."
You won't believe me. But that's what's
like, especially when he looks down and says, "Like, I wish Qui-Gon was here right now." Like, that looked real. It's like, oh my
god, he really does wish he was there.
Yeah, and it's just like when in the Geonosis arena when he has all the Jedi surrounded, like. And Mace Windu's telling him that they're not going to surrender. And he's like, well, I'm sorry. But he looked genuinely sorry that he would have to do that, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And then you like read Republic comics and like Dooku's just a sick bastard.
I love Dooku, the comics, though. It's so great. Especially with the boss. Oh, yes. More of that. It's good stuff.
Dooku's also a piece of shit in TCW, too.
Oh, yeah. He's a straight up bad guy.
This is a bad guy, man.
All right, everyone. It is getting late.
Are we leaving, Lance? Okay, bye. I love you.
Yeah, I don't love you, Slav.
Such hatred.
Anyway, thanks for joining, guys. That was fun. I love when Pablo says stupid shit like that. So I can.
Yeah, I do. I actually really enjoy, reacting to stuff on Twitter like this.
Yeah, and if you guys ever see any tweet from Twitter or whatever, don't be afraid to tag me. I love doing these streams; they're hilarious. But anyway, so thanks for joining, guys. Thanks to everybody in stream chat who joined. Y'all have an excellent weekend, and y'all have a good week.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.
I love you guys. I hate you.
We love you too, Lance.